Hello and welcome to another episode of Five Alum Task Force. If you're watching on the video, we're glad to have you with us. Glad to be here with you. If you're listening to the audio, well, you heard the first opening part of the show. And my guest today is a returning guest, probably one of the people that I admire most, who's both still an active fire chief, still teaching, still has a great podcast, the B Shifter podcast, and makes a little bit of time every once in a while to join me here on Five Alum Task Force, and that is our friend and a great supporter and a great chief, and that's Chief John Vance. Chief Vance started his career in the fire service as an explorer in 1982 and has been involved in fire department and or municipal services ever since. He has been the fire chief of the Minnetonka, Minnesota Fire Department. Thank goodness it's in the end of May, right, Chief? Since August of 2013. Prior to that, he spent nearly 12 years as a chief officer with the Harris Township Fire Department and the Clay Fire Territory in South Bend, Indiana. He holds a bachelor's degree in fire service management from Southern Illinois University, a certificate in executive management for the University of Notre Dame, and is an accredited chief officer from the Center for Public Safety Excellence. The chief has been a blue card lead instructor since its inception, since 2008, and leads by the mantra, be safe, be effective, and be nice. Well, we know, especially those last two words always came from, don't we, Chief?
Yes.
Welcome back to the show. So happy to have you with us.
Thank you. Yeah, Bruno was a huge influence of mine. And as you read, my background, I think I'm just fortunate to be here because I've had so many great influences, from learning from people like you, Steve, and learning from Bruno and learning from anybody that I could listen to and take notes from and watch how their fire department operates. I'm very, very fortunate because I don't think there's a lot of people who could be a chief officer for 23 years, never been fired. Yet. I always say yet, and it's like, you get a little older and you start to just speak your mind sometimes. And I've got to edit myself when I'm having those conversations. And, currently we're having some issues here locally with our EMS service and stuff. And I've got to zip it once in a while, but I'm fortunate that I was given those ethos from Chief Brunacini and so many other people out there that I've been able to learn from and continue on their legacy too as a fire chief. So it's great to be here today and great to see you in one piece and healthy.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I really appreciate that. And I remember starting to read Firehouse had just come out. I just started in 77 in the fire service, and I saw this column from Chief Brunacini, and I started reading them, and I just sat there every month and just read another article and said, "Oh, this I got to learn how to do this. How do I do this?" But a lot of it, I think the most important thing he gave us was not tactics. He taught us about being people as firefighters, that the people that we are and the people that we serve. And I love, and I've said it a gazillion times on this show, and I'm sure you've said it on B Shifter as well, is that his most important adage that he gave us was, our job is to take care of Mrs. Smith on her worst possible day, even if that worst possible day is simply her cat up a tree.
Absolutely.
And, another good friend of the podcast, and I'm lucky, so glad to have him as a friend, is Chief Kevin Burns. He was the deputy chief in the town where I grew up, Kevin, in Framingham, Mass. Now a city, was a town then. We're only 2 years apart, but we're in the same schools together, 2 years apart, and didn't know each other then. But we met on social media, and I had him. He's been on the show several times, and hopefully we're heading up to Boston area for my nephew's wedding in August. So I've already made plans, hopefully be able to see Chief Burns and treat him to lunch this time around. He took me out to lunch back in last time I was there in 2019. But he also was a great teacher, and he teaches, as you guys do on B Shifter. What I really enjoy about it is that you're not yelling at anybody. You guys present and explain and teach. And you always make sure that the listener has had the opportunity of hearing several different variations on the answer of the question, because they have to at some point they have to be old enough and responsible enough to make their own decisions. But if we give them that information to share, then they can learn from that, share it with somebody else, share it with an officer if they're not an officer yet, etc. And that, I think, is that trickle down from Chief Bruno, is that he taught us that we can still be great firefighters. We can be excellent teachers. Doesn't mean we have to beat the hell out of anybody. It just means we have to work with each other as a family, as the brotherhood and the sisterhood that we have today.
All right.
And
well, you know, I'm so fortunate as a solid C student and a product of the California school system that I'm at where I'm at today. And when I get to sit around the table with Nick Bernasini, Terry Garrison, Josh Bloom, Jeff King, all the other guys I get to work with, number one, I learn something every single time I sit down. So and I'm just sitting there in awe, because these are guys that I would go to classes from at FDIC, or when Brunasini used to have the symposiums out in Phoenix. And
right.
I'd watch somebody like Terry Garrison speak in front of everyone, and I'd go to his classes, and I would think to myself, I want to be an instructor like that. I want to be a leader like that. I want to be a chief like that. Nick Bernasini is the funniest person I know. And he and I could sit and watch TV together and laugh, and we have a good time. And we've had the opportunity to travel because of what we do with Blue Card. So, you know, we've spent a couple of weeks together at times, you know, going to Hawaii and going to other places, and teaching together, then having great meals at night and just cracking each other up and talking about the fire service and talking about the future. And at no time is it this angry, preachy, we're going to tell you the way it is. It's like, if you want to listen, you're welcome to hang out with us and listen. And that's exactly what those podcasts are. It's some guys hanging out, talking about the fire service, giving you some perspective on maybe our education and our experience, and hopefully some of the road rash that we got along the way as leaders. You don't have to get, because you're learning a little bit from us, or we're sharing that experience with you. And then those questions that we get actually help us learn too. So I think all the guys that are involved in B Shifter come at it with that same mentality, and it's really Chief Bruno's mentality. Is we're just there to talk and pass information along. And I think so much today is angry or preachy, or you're wrong, I'm right, and I'm not going to listen to you at all because, you know, I'm the right one. And we really try to get away from that and just pass things on. Now, are we passionate about some of our opinions? Absolutely. I mean, I think there's some things that are non-negotiable with us when it comes to safety and the way that we deal with fire scenes and communication and where the IC is going to be. But the reason we're so passionate about it is because we know through our experience, through reading NIOSH reports. Poor Chief Garrison's department, when he was the chief at Houston, had I believe 8 line of duty deaths during his tenure, and they stacked up even more than that. I believe around 20 in the last 2 decades. So that department has had so much tragedy, and we know through the investigations why some of this happens. We knew through what has happened to other firefighters why it happens, and there's a huge command component to that. The way that the people are led, the way that the scenes are commanded, really has a proximal cause to why those line of duty deaths happen. And some of the naysayers out there will say, you know, well, not that many firefighters are killed in the line of duty these days. You know, those numbers are going down, and some of the things that you guys talk about really isn't contributing. Or they say the NIOSH report is just a cut and paste because it's the same thing over and over again. Well, I'm here to submit to you that it's the same thing over and over again because we haven't found a new way to kill firefighters. We're still dying from the same thing. So if you look at the Hackensack Ford fire, you look at the Coos Bay, Oregon fire, you look at what happened in
South
Charleston.
Carolina, right?
Yeah, I mean, all of them are very, very similar, and we just want to stop that from happening again. We think that all of these lessons, including the biggest lesson of all that we learned from the loss of Brett Tarver back in 2001 with the Phoenix Fire Department, we can learn lessons from those sacrifices firefighters have made, and we shouldn't let it happen again. So when we get passionate about something, especially command issues, is because we know that having a stationary command post with the IC in a vehicle, windows rolled up, listening to the radio is so important for that next transmission to be Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Right. When we talk about risk management, people are saying that we're risk adverse in Blue Card. And I actually think, I mean, if you rode along with the Minnetonka Fire Department or some of the fire departments around me here in Minnesota that do Blue Card, we're actually more aggressive because of Blue Card, but it's because we have given those officers, the company officers riding the right front seat and the chief officers that are arriving in subsequent command vehicles, the tools to be able to make decisions, to have recognition prime decision making. So when it comes time to having an incident action plan and communicating that on the radio, they know what they're doing and it's so competent. So anyway, that's the stuff we get passionate about. And but other than that, it's so much fun to be able to hang out with those guys and talk about the fire service and leadership, because I was fans of theirs way before I got to be a buddy of theirs. And now that I get to sit around the table and have those discussions with those guys, I feel like one of the most fortunate people in the world.
And I couldn't agree more as a regular listener to the podcast. It's one of my favorites to listen to. And as I mentioned to you in the emails, as we were setting today up, is some of the episodes that you do, especially with radio traffic. I think those are just invaluable in teaching, and especially when you juxtapose one of the great radio situations on a very fluid and changing fire ground to a standard communication going back and forth, and you can hear the difference, and you hear how well one of them works and how it sounds. And you hear the responses and nobody's trampling over the other person. Everything's done. And then you hear others where, repeat that. I couldn't hear that. You're hearing confusion. And that's absolutely should be the last thing that anybody hears, whether it's directly from somebody else's mouth or on the radio, any sign of confusion. We can't afford that on a fire ground.
And one of the things we say is, if you're listening to air traffic controllers on the recordings of them, you never hear an air traffic controller say, last aircraft with traffic, repeat. They're right on it because that's their job. And as we're in the command post, our job is to listen to the radio traffic, to answer, and to really be the traffic cop when it comes to getting people resources, to make sure that we're getting CAN reports and that we're matching up the incident action plan with what we're actually seeing at the time and the reports that we're getting from the interior company. So it's really a system. People just really misunderstand it, and those are folks who haven't really been through the classes or anything. But, another thing we hear is you're just going to talk the fire out. By having good communication, especially using the order model where we can correct each other if the information wasn't correctly received, really leads to less radio traffic in the long run. And a lot of times in my job, which I'm so fortunate for now, I come in as the support officer for the IC. For many years, I was the IC, and now being a little more senior, I'm getting caught up on my wires here. Being a little more senior here, I'm going in as a support officer to support the incident commander. I say, embrace the silence. If you're not hearing anything and you've got good CAN reports, just let it go. We're not there to micromanage the companies that are on the inside. And, another thing about Blue Card and really what Chief Brunacini used to say is there's 3 levels on the fire ground: our task, tactical, and strategic. And one can't outperform the other. So that's why Blue Card departments that are really firing all cylinders and doing Blue Card, you got your task level. So that's the fire companies that are able to pull lines, access areas that they need to access, search for victims, and extinguish fire. And if they can't do that well, the person out in the car cannot outperform that. You cannot, as the incident commander, outperform a company that has no idea what they're doing.
Right.
If you have a tactical level boss who isn't on the same page with the task and strategic level, you can't outperform that. So all three levels of that fire department needs to be firing on all cylinders. And that's why our task level training is so important. Our tactical level training for our company officers is so important. And then strategic level training for our chief officers that are there as the strategic incident commander. So all three have to be performing very, very well, or it doesn't work on the fire ground. So, basically right now we're focusing on the strategic and tactical with Blue Card. And then we go back to the departments and say, and you got to train at the task level too. And you all have to train with each other in order to make sure this happens correctly. The chief officers can't be on the sideline heckling or doing whatever they do. They have to be a participant in that training process. When people get hired at my department, we tell them day one. In fact, we tell them during the hiring process before they even start. It's like, we are a training fire department. If you don't like to train, this isn't the place for you, because we train all the time. We train thousands and thousands of hours a year. When I was here this morning, I walked in, they were getting set up for an 8:30 drill to do moving a lot of water. We're using HUMAT valves and large diameter hose. It's a daily thing. And as Chief Goldfeder always says, every day should be a training day. Every day is a training day at the Minnetonka Fire Department, because it is so important for the people at the task and tactical level to have those touches. Because, my department's going on a couple dozen fires a year in our city, and maybe a couple dozen more on auto aid. That's not a lot of touches. So how are we going to be good when we get there? Well, it's only going to be through practice and by getting that repetition. Malcolm Gladwell talks about the 10,000 hours, and we become an expert after 10,000 hours. And our goal is to get those 10,000 hours in. So at 3:00 in the morning, we're making the right decisions, and those companies are able to move water, get water on the fire very, very quickly, search the occupancy if we can do a search, if we're in the offensive strategy, and wrap it up. Our favorite fires here are those room and contents fires, because if we can get there quickly and control it and hold it to the room of origin, not only are we saving lives and property, but we're getting out of there quick, so we're available for the next call too. And not every fire has to be a big event. So we love that kind of concept, that we're on all three levels all the time, and that's really one of the big things that Blue Card has brought us.
Well, also, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention another one of our late great leaders, and that was Chief Don Abbott. Mm-hmm. And Chief Abbott, with his Mayday program, I know, yes, it was all about long after I was out of the fire service, but having him as a guest and reading a lot of what he shared with me, there are so many lessons that we can still learn from Maydays, even that are years old, because of the fact we still make some of those same mistakes every single day at departments across this country. And it's not because they're doing it on purpose. It's because it happens. And we know that, crap happens in life. We can have all the plans we want, as the old joke goes, man plans and the good Lord laughs. But we can plan for everything. But that doesn't mean we're going to be ready for everything. And when we look, and you mentioned the NIOSH reports, the one that just came out last week, I believe, on a line of duty death, that, the blame was that we didn't have a 360 done. A tick wasn't used appropriately. All the things that we still check off today were not done. And this incident only occurred 2 years ago.
Yep.
And we're still not doing it. What does it take? And I think this leads us to what you want to talk about, building your culture, is what does it take? And Sean Duffy, who's up in the North Woods now, no longer down here in South Florida, talks about always, build your culture. And if your culture only focuses on one aspect of firefighting, and you think that's the most important thing, we're going to be the most aggressive responding fire department in the country. Well, you can't always be an aggressive fire department on every fire. You have to have that first due officer has to make that quick size up before, and then start to 360 and make sure the tick is there. But if you don't do that step, those are what we see in these NIOSH reports. Oh, the 360 nobody carried the tick with them out of the truck, but it's there. Every apparatus has one. How come nobody took it out? We didn't make the 360. There wasn't good communications. The radio training, my God, today, yes, the radios are much more complex than they've ever been. But every department still trains on radios. And if you don't train your members on how to use those radios, then you're just waiting for an issue to occur. And we hope it's the least dangerous issue to happen. But sadly, we know that all too often maydays aren't heard because of a radio, let's say radio conduct, to be polite. Yeah. And our poor brother or sister is in that closet trying to give out this message, and nobody can hear them. And then next thing we know, we're carrying them out and we're saying goodbye. We got to stop that. We have to stop it. So let's get to, how do we build a culture that, not perfect, because none of us are perfect. We never will be.
Right.
We always are going to make mistakes. But as you know, my late dad, may he rest in peace, always said to me, if you can look in that mirror, that person in the mirror knows every secret you have, everything that you, and if you can answer, if you look at that mirror, yourself in the mirror, and you said, did I do the best on that? And if that answer is yes, then don't be ashamed of yourself. Maybe, I remember when I got a C on one of my first college papers, and I was so upset. And my dad said, why are you upset? I said, because I only got a C. He says, hey, listen, kiddo, you're at a university where there are a lot of smart people smarter than you from all over the world are there. Okay. Yes, you were an A+ student in high school, but these are different courses. So you may not be an A+ in every, did you ever take anthropology before? I said, no. He goes, well, okay. So maybe this just means that in that class, you got a C+. Doesn't mean you're a bad kid or a bad student. Did you work your hardest? And I said, yeah, of course we didn't, the only computers there, we didn't have portable computers, so you had to go to the library and write notes and everything. And I said, yes, Pops, I did. I really tried hard. And he goes, then stand with your head held high. Because all it means is that in that thing, that's all you did. You didn't do anything bad. You didn't, you didn't prepare. It wasn't that you did not prepare. You worked hard in the library. You did that. Because what's important to me is, did you try your best? He goes, that's what I care about, not your grades.
What business was Mr. Green in?
My dad was a buyer for one of the large East Coast supermarket. Worked for 42 years for them. They held the place during World War II when he was off in the Pacific. Came back 42 years as a head buyer, and when he retired in 78, he was making $21,000 a year. And the guy he had to train to replace him, who had never done anything in retail, never stepped into that at all, was going to start at 60.
Wow.
But you know what? I always was afraid my dad was going to really be angry. And he said, that's him. That's okay. Yeah. I did my best job. I worked there for 42 years. I'm happy.
The greatest generation. I mean, the influence from those, and that's kind of what we're missing these days, I think, in a lot of ways. And I'm not bagging on the kids at all right now, because I think we have some very bright up and coming people. They're just raised different, and they didn't have the influence of people who survived the Depression, people who participated in a world war, who went off and fought and then came back and spoke nothing of it to anybody until several years later. And just a sidebar, I've got a guy down the street here that passed away just a few years ago, but he was part of Easy Company that was on the HBO series Band of Brothers. Yeah. His kids didn't know about that until 1991. And it's like, Dad walked with a limp, and we know he went to World War II, but he just came home and put a smile on his face and went about his business and built his family and had a career. And until someone did a new magazine article about the Band of Brothers, which ended up becoming an HBO miniseries, no one even knew about it. So, we're missing out on some of those guys right now. So that's why I ask you the question, because I'm always fascinated by that generation and the hardships they endured and the lessons that they passed along to us. And that's why with culture, one of the things is, and you were kind of getting there, is we always have to be in the process of fixing ourselves.
Right.
And whether it's the fire department, myself as a fire chief, myself as a husband, a dad, whatever I'm doing, I always think it's like, what can I do to be better? It's part of the continuous improvement model. And I don't think whether, you're a dad or a chief or a firefighter, you're ever done. We're all a work in progress. And as you said, Steve, we're not perfect. So we've got to take these lessons that we learned either from Mr. Green or Chief Brunacini or Don Abbott, any of these guys, and continue to apply them, because obviously if we're doing the same thing today that we did in 2008, that we did in 1984, we haven't learned those lessons yet. So I think that, the first thing is we are always improving. Over here on my office, I've got a sign that says 1% better every day. And if every day that I leave here, we can just be a little better than we were the day before, we're making progress. I'm satisfied. And I think chiefs a lot of times drive themselves crazy because they want to see all this progress. And turning a fire department to go into a direction oftentimes is like turning a battleship. It's not a speedboat. It's going to take some time to get us into the direction that we need to go. So incrementally, if we can have those changes and those little positive victories every day, you need to be happy with that. And then what happens is 10 years later, you look in the rearview mirror, and that's kind of where I am in my career right now, and say, 10 years ago, this is what we were doing, and this is where we are today. And it gives you a great deal of satisfaction, and also builds a lot of pride within the organization.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a
I
doubt.
think a lot of times, and I'm not bagging on other fire chiefs, but a lot of times the chiefs make it about them, and it isn't about them. And I would submit that our organizations are, at times I need to be at the tip of the spear and lead the organization in certain things. And then other times I need to support the entire organization. I'm here to make the firefighters and the officers better and supported by getting them the resources, including additional manpower, the right equipment, the right facilities, the right training. And then, ask them, what do they need? Do you feel empowered to make those decisions? And I think if you talk to our officers, and we talk about fire department empowerment or firefighter empowerment all the time, they are empowered to make their decisions every day that they're here. I get involved in very little. And I say to other chiefs, I think, really day-to-day operations, making decisions at a department my size, which we have about 90 people, 95 people, depending on where our staffing level is. I should be involved in like 2 to 5% of the daily decisions that happen. I'm the one who needs to be looking ahead and making the strategy for the department. So next year and the year after, and right now, this is a sidebar, but with apparatus costs and order times are out of control. We just did an apparatus plan that ends in 2040. It's 2023 right now, and we're planning our apparatus till 2040. Well, it takes a chief to be strategic to look ahead and make those kind of plans with your finance department and everything else. Let the folks who are down on the floor run the fire department, and I'm here to support them. But, as a chief, you do it within framework. So you talked at the beginning about really what my philosophy is with be safe, be effective, and be nice. It starts with safety. And these days, I think there's been so much criticism of the safety culture. And, there's guys out there, and I call them the oathers. We took this oath to put ourselves in harm's way. And, no matter what happens, you got to get in there, and you got to go in no matter what. And I say, well, yeah and no. And I want to back up and say where I start with safety culture is the environment within the fire department. If you do not have a good environment for your people to work in, and that's an environment where members are supporting each other, officers are supporting other officers, the chiefs are supporting each other, and all those three levels are really aligned, you're going to have fractures within your department. And on that bad day where, God forbid, you have a line of duty death or a serious injury amongst your firefighters, those fissures are going to become valleys and big divides, because then it becomes blaming each other. Well, A shift did this, and it wouldn't have happened if it was B shift, or C shift did that. And that's a lesson from Bruno.
Yeah.
All the shifts have to be aligned, and they all have to be on the same page. And that goes to, if A shift likes a certain hose load and B shift wants another hose load, you can't let those guys change the hose loads every day, because the B shift guy is going to be overtime on A shift and isn't going to know how to pull the load that's on the truck. So, we are divided up into these schedules because that's how we have to work, but we are one department, and
Right.
that one department has to be a good environment for people to work in, an environment where people can speak up. Whether you're a probationary firefighter or the most senior person, if you see something that's wrong, especially something that is going to affect our safety, you're empowered to speak up and change it and say, hey, this isn't right. When we go to crew resource management, I think we talked about that a little bit last time, where the airline pilots back in the 70s had the mentality that you don't question the captain, because that was kind of the military experience. Right. So all these airplanes would auger into the ground, and the first officer and the engineer on board would know exactly what's going on. They knew the plane was going to crash, but it's like, well, God forbid we question anything the captain's doing. Well, what has saved the airline industry and hundreds of thousands of lives? Crew resource management, where everyone is empowered to speak up and say something if they see something and get us back on track. So whether that is a big thing like a safety issue, people not wearing their seatbelts, people not having spotters when they back, people not following air management policies, people not being in the right strategy of fires, whatever that is, that's one thing. But it's even within the station that they're able to speak up. If they don't have the tools and the equipment and the training they need, we need to give that to them as fire chiefs. So I think the first thing is really having that environment that people can thrive in and grow in, and that you're encouraging people to know more than I do, because there's a lot of guys at this department now that know a hell of a lot more than I do, especially when it comes to hydraulics and when it comes to pumping lines and when it comes to designing apparatus. We're a 5-station department. I don't design the apparatus. The firefighters design the apparatus. Now, I have to sign off on it because we have a certain budget we have to make sure that we hit, or the finance director is going to have my neck. But other than that, I'm not making these fire trucks what do you call it, like a testament to who the fire chief is, which you see that a lot of times. It's, those fire trucks are for the firefighters. So we got to go to them on how it's designed. Yeah, and the community. Yeah, they serve the community. They're operated by the firefighters. So if the firefighters aren't getting input on how they're made, just as an example, that's going to lead to a poor environment. And then the other thing is looking out for each other, creating that culture within where we've got each other's backs. And we hear all this stuff about brotherhood, but just wait until a problem happens with the contract, or wait until a problem happens with, Billy got to do this and I didn't, and Jimmy didn't get to, and then it turns into a fight between shifts, and suddenly people are stabbing each other in the back. Again, that is going to affect the safety on the department. If you've got feuding shifts, feuding companies, feuding stations, and we've had it. I'm not saying our department's perfect. Again, there's been a lot of turbulent water over the last 10 years that we've had to get through in order to get to the spot that we're at right now, where people are getting along, and this is truly one department. So if you're a chief out there or aspiring chief and you're going through these things, you just got to stick with it. It's not going to change overnight. But if your vision is for a department that has a good environment, where people look out for each other, where people follow the rules and the policy that we all agree to, when we have our officer meetings, we put our hands down and say, okay, this is the law. If anyone wants to drop the BS flag right now and say, you don't agree with this, let's say it. But when we leave this room, we're all going to support it and support each other. Then you've got an aligned organization. And then we really get into scene safety, where it's that round trip ticket mentality. And there's so many things that come into that round trip ticket mentality. First of all, it's Chief used to say it, we want our members to be able to exploit the pension system as much as possible, right? To take full advantage of it. So that means leaving the fire service without the cancers, like we were talking about earlier before we started rolling tape. There's all these things out there that we didn't know even 10 years ago that could kill us with the PFAS and everything else? Are we doing things to limit the exposure for our members? Are we deconning them? We've been very, very fortunate that we have a mayor and council that support us here. Every member has 2 full sets of gear, including helmets and boots.
That's
so
great.
when one set goes out of service, you got a backup set right there ready to go, and we can decon that second set. Health screenings, and not making those health screenings a penalty. We're not there to penalize somebody if they're in bad health, or they have a heart condition, or they're a little overweight, or they have hypertension. We're there to get them back to health so they don't have a heart attack when they start pulling a hose line at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's really that round trip ticket. And then it's how we manage the scene, which kind of gets back to Blue Card. Are we managing the scene using the risk management model and having competent commanders, competent officers, so our people know, hey, we've got your back. We're going to make the right decision here. And I say we're a sensibly aggressive fire service for that. So we are going to be aggressive and take the lines inside when we can. But I'm extremely staffing limited. Right now, I think there's 8 people on duty today. We don't have all our companies in service, and that's for a city of 55,000 people. And it's if we're in that staffing situation, we have to make the appropriate decisions for them. And I think a lot of times some very well-meaning instructors, and a lot of them I've learned a ton of stuff from, go and start talking about being aggressive and everything else. Well, they're coming from a standpoint where they have 50 people who are arriving on the fire in the first 10 minutes. We don't have that here. So when you go to one of these classes and somebody starts talking about us being a bunch of wusses because we don't always go inside, well, you got to ask yourself, what kind of staffing do they have? I wish everything had 4-person staffing. We talk about that all the time on the podcast. We don't. So we have to make the adjustments for that. It's not the firefighters' fault. It's not the lieutenants and captains' fault. The city doesn't staff us that way. So we have to make those decisions. I have plain out told our city manager sometimes is we're not really a rescue department. If you're expecting us to get in and rescue people when there's a fire, we're going to try, but we are a get water on the fire department because of the resources that we have. And hopefully that water application is going to support the search after the water application. But if I leave the fire unabated, then we're going to have problems. We might have more victims, and some of those victims might be firefighters. So I'm getting a little fired up right now, but
that's good.
I'm excited about all that because I think so many times that safety culture is misunderstood and actually a little bit demonized, because we are all risk managers. We all have to look at the outside of the building and say, that's a building I'll go in, or that's a building I won't go in. And I'm in a pretty affluent community here. I think we have just about 95% occupancy rate in all of our commercial buildings. So I have very few commercial buildings that are sitting vacant right now. And if they are sitting vacant, they're getting ready to be redeveloped into apartment buildings. But I know that there's certain buildings here that we cannot send firefighters into because that building has sat empty for 20 years and has moss and mold and beams falling and drop ceilings falling in. And it's going to be a firefighter killer if we go inside. And then, you get what if somebody wandered in there? What if a homeless person went in there? Well, you got to take the intel that you have at the scene and make your best decision at the time.
Right.
And maybe that decision is an aggressive fire attack, push in and try to get somebody out. But a lot of times, if I'm pulling up in the middle of the night and I've got fire blowing out of every window of a commercial building that I know has been vacant for 20 years, to me, that decision's pretty easy. That's going to be a defensive fire. There is not a building in the world worth the life of a firefighter. And so I think you take those elements as far as safety goes and having that culture where it's okay to be safe and be sensibly aggressive and treat each other right and have each other's backs and look out for each other. And that really is the first element of having a good culture within the department. And then the second element is being effective. And, being effective is, going back to it, I said at the top of the podcast when we started talking about being well trained and being a trained fire department or a training fire department. If you've got a department where, we're too busy to train, bullshit. Excuse me, I probably shouldn't say it. BS. BS. I've had I've had the good fortune of being able to visit some of the top fire departments. When I say top, the biggest fire departments in the world. And pre 9/11, I was at Rescue One night in New York City, and seeing those guys, including a member who was about 60 years old, out training at 10 o'clock at night. Those guys are busy. They're in Manhattan. They're making calls, right? And they're still rigging ropes at 10 o'clock at night and sharpening saws. And one of the other members said, yeah, you won't see us sitting down too much. There might be a nap here and there, and we might hit the rack for a while, but there's no lazy boys, and there's no, sitting around, playing pickleball or whatever they were doing at the time. We're here to train. So there's no excuse not to train. And having good training actually instills a lot of pride in your department. I've seen departments out there that don't train, and those members oftentimes really lose faith in their organization because they go to the scene and they can't perform, and then they wonder why. It's like, boy, why aren't we able to do the things that some of these other departments do? And it really comes down to the training. They're not training, or if they're training on the wrong things. Active shooter, yeah, that's something that we have to deal with, but it's that much of what our actual mission is. I mean, it says fire department on the side of the vehicle. We had damn well better be good at pulling lines, establishing water supply, and getting those lines in service very, very quickly. And whether that's a deck gun that's trained at the fire while we're setting that up, or however we're getting water on the fire, our trucks need to be set up that way. Our people have to have the mentality that we're getting off quick and hustling to get it done. And I think that's the other point is being prepared. And we always say being battle ready. Being battle ready means first thing in the morning. It isn't we're making breakfast. It isn't that we're checking the scores of the games the night before. The first thing in the morning is we're getting ready to go for the day. Do we have air in our air packs? Is the truck fueled? Is there water in the tank? Are you looking around as a company officer and seeing all these guys that are with me today, or gals that are with me today? They're mentally prepared. They are fit for duty. They're ready to go to work for the day. Do we have a plan? Are we talking about the weather? It's a beautiful day here today. It's about 80 degrees, sunny. It feels like Southern California. That lasts for about 1 week in Minnesota. It's going to feel like the swamplands of Florida probably by next week. But, you talk about the weather. You talk about anything else that's special going on. Every single day we have a briefing, and that briefing is with the entire shift. And I call it the campfire, but it's where you sit around the campfire and you have your briefing for the day, and you talk about what's going to happen and give everybody a plan, so they know what's going to happen. And you give them the reminders too. We had a problem on our department a while back where we weren't laying into fires. There was a couple of fires where they turned the corner, and like a moth to the flame, and this happens in our business, they would just drive right by the hydrant and pull up in front of the house and forget to lay in. So it's like every day in the briefing, let's talk about laying in, just so it's on everyone's mind. So when that fire does pop, that we're establishing a water supply on the way in.
Well, especially when that, January, and you got 18 inches of snow, and then you have to do a reverse lay because you drove past the hydrant, and you're going to try to stop muling of LDH from the engine through the snow to get back to that hydrant. You're just making your whole effort much more difficult.
I love
than it has to be.
I love going to fires. I mean, I wish they didn't happen, but I try to go to all of our fires, and there's been more than once that I have gotten there and had to hand jack a line all the way to a hydrant, sometimes a couple 100 feet. Luckily, I have had some assistance with that, but I'm getting too old for that, man. So yeah, lay in. Yeah, I don't want to have to see the chief doing that. The other thing.
Good.
Oh, go ahead. The other thing about effectiveness is, our friend Terry Garrison really highlights this a lot, and it's something that we learned from Bruno, and it continues to get reinforced by Terry all the time, is the customer needs to be in the center of everything that we do. How does this benefit Mrs. Smith? So whether it's a new piece of apparatus, a new procedure we're going to do, a new service we're going to offer, whatever it is, what's the benefit for Mrs. Smith? And if we say it has a great benefit for Mrs. Smith, awesome, let's do it. This is going to be great for her and great for the department. But if it's really for us, which a lot of times in the fire service, we do stuff that's just for us. And I get it, once in a while we have to do that, but with ceremonies and stuff like that. But if it really doesn't have a benefit for the customer, we really shouldn't be doing it. And our decisions that we make, whether you're the firefighter, the company officer, or the chief officer, needs to have the customer in the middle of it. And if that customer does not get a benefit from it, we need to say, well, this is something we're going to take a pass on. And then the last thing is because I really hit always improving. We talked about continuous improvement, but it's being outcome driven. So we are here to have the best possible outcomes, and we celebrate those outcomes. We talk about how good we did, along with what we can improve next time. So that's good communication. And we talk about with command function number 8, when we terminate command, part of that is a review and revise, where we have that tailboard critique. And I love the late, great Tom Brennan. We learned so much from Tom Brennan when he was at Fire Engineering. And again, I've had the good fortune of being able to share a couple of pitchers of beer as a new chief with him. And he said, if you don't have that tailboard talk before you go back to the firehouse, the lies are going to be made up the minute they get back on the engine. Did you see what ladder 1 did? Did you see what those guys from B shift, whatever it was, that they're always going to start their own narrative. That's why if you can circle everybody up, and you can't always do it, but we try to do it most of the time. You circle people up and say, what went right? What went wrong? What can we do different next time? And then you let everybody go. You get that quick critique, and that's the opportunity everybody has to bring something up. And usually, and this is where the real success comes in, is they self-diagnose, Steve. They say, you know what? I should have hit that hydrant on the way in. And before you say it, Chief, I know I drove by it. So, and if you can get a member to say that for themselves instead of the chief pointing it out or their captain pointing it out, they're going to do it next time because they self-diagnose the problem.
Right.
So having that outcome driven and always improving and being able to communicate that on the scene, even before we go back to the firehouse, is so important.
It is. And before we take a break, I want to go back to one thing that you said, which is the culture in the firehouse. And one of the things I was very lucky when I joined this volunteer combination department in North Carolina, was that basically everything revolved around the kitchen table. Now, there were only, the chief was paid, the captain was paid, our fire prevention officer was paid, the secretary was paid, and then each of the caretakers, each of them worked 24 on, 48 off, and their job was to get that first apparatus out because the rest of us were volunteers coming in to respond. So, but the chief, Chief Bobby Wilson, I hope he's still around. I got to see him several years ago before COVID. So my hope and prayer. And he was a wonderful chief. He took me in as a kid with no background at all. I knew tools, hand tools, because of my dad. I learned how to use hammers and drills and hand drills and screwdrivers. So I knew how to use tools, but I couldn't do anything in a car, other than fill a tank. That was my. But this chief and one of the caretakers who became our mentor and is still a dear friend today, thank God, was always, everything was around the kitchen table. Breakfast was around the kitchen table there, and then sometimes lunch, and everybody could talk. Everybody shared. And sometimes there were jokes, but anybody could sit at that table in the morning or in the afternoon and we talked about stuff. And sometimes we would come back, if we had a call in the morning, we'd discuss it at the lunch table. We'd say, okay, so what did we do? What was good about this call? What did we get done? Well, you and Rich got that hose connected to the hydrant right away. You laid in the package. You used the drill that we did for box 17-2, and you laid it the way we needed it. You left the package. You left for the other next new engine to come in and make the contact, but you got the first water going. He says, that was a great job. Now, you guys on the second engine, you should have looked what they had done to see that they already had it ready for you. So all you had to do was bring to the other side of the hydrant and we would have been ready. But I'm not sure why you guys missed that, but next time around on the drill, let's try working on it together. And he never castigated them or us. The chief made every situation a learning environment for us. And yeah, there'd be kidding, there'd be a little bit of ribbing, but that was our culture, was that kitchen table in that room. And at the second department I was able to go to, and although I came in with a lot more certifications from North Carolina than most of the firefighters who were in that department long before I got to there outside of Syracuse, was that I talked them into using video. I had gotten into video in '77, had my own video business as a side in North Carolina, brought it up with me to Syracuse. And I said to the chief, I said, if we had a video unit, I can't fight fire anymore. I'll be happy to run the camera and do the editing, because we could do after action reviews. He goes, and he was a Syracuse firefighter for the city. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, if I'm there and I can shoot as things are going on and have shots of the commander and get audio of whoever the IC was, or the officers who were on the Alpha side or Bravo division, whatever you want to call it. I said, we will look at that tape. We're not going to edit it, but we'll just look at it and look at it as a study way. Hey, how did we do at this job? And he said, yeah, I like that idea. Can you put everything up in the heavy rescue and load it there so it'll always be there? I said, yeah, not a problem. And so they did. They bought into it, and we started. So that gave me a little more purpose again. So I couldn't fight fire, but I was in charge of the video unit, and we started doing the after actions through the video. Now it wasn't a matter of just what somebody was saying. We had video proof of what we did good and where we may have messed up. And again, we didn't take it as, you a knucklehead. What were you even thinking? That we just said, okay, so we made a little mistake here. Now, if we have a similar situation, if we do it this way, we might be able to avoid that and have a second person come in over there. We should be all set. That's the way they did it. And for me, I was still, a neophyte. These were years 5, 6, and 7, and 8. But I still learned so much because it was providing me, an educator, already with an educational moment for myself, and that I was able to share when I did the video, start with the other people. And that was, to me, one of the best bonds that we had in those two departments, is the fact that we had that culture that this wasn't us. It's like the old TV show, All About Us. I didn't watch because I don't watch a lot of network stuff, but that's really what these two departments focused on. We, it's never an I, it's not a you, it's an us. It's
Absolutely.
always us.
Yep.
And that's the way we have to look at it, because we are we need to be a cohesive ball that goes in and handles these emergencies.
I could not agree more with those 2 points. The last time we talked, actually, we were in the process of building this brand new headquarters fire station, and the centerpiece in this building is the kitchen. Right. And it is where all the magic happens. And it starts in the morning with coffee. First thing when I come in, or the deputy chief and the assistant chiefs, we're the front office guys, but we have coffee with the crew in the morning. The deputy chief always eats breakfast with the crew. He's a 40-hour guy, but he goes down and checks in with the crew and eats his breakfast down there. We have lunch together. Everybody we don't go out to lunch as chiefs. Typically we have lunch with the crew here at headquarters. And, it's where you have those great conversations. And what does my heart well is when I leave here at night and I walk through there and say goodnight to everybody. That's where they're hanging out. They hang out there all day. And in this brand new fire station, it's $17 million building with dorm rooms and everything else. They're not hanging out in their dorm rooms. They're hanging out with each other. And I love to see that, because people don't talk anymore. I mean, right. They text and they won't, talk to each other. And to go down there and see people having coffee or eating with each other and having these conversations, whether it's about the job or about whatever else is going on, does my heart good, because that is going to make them a more cohesive team.
Absolutely, without a doubt. All right, folks, we're going to take a break here. If you're watching the video, you're not going to see anything different. It's going to just flow one into the other. If you're listening to the audio, well, as you know, we're going to take a break, have a few public service announcements for the fire service, for our listeners, and then we'll be right back with our guest, Chief John Vance, on this episode of 5 Alarm Task Force. As always, please stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to this episode of Five Alum Task Force. And we have been in the time machine. That's right. When we started our interview with our guest, Chief John Vance, was last Friday, which was, I believe, the 26th of May. And here we are now recording this part on Friday the 2nd. And that's because the chief had a condo fire he had to respond to last week, which takes a lot more precedence for him than we do. But it was glad to have him on that first part of the show. And we start talking about the culture in your fire service, not the fire service, but your fire service. And we discussed there, and you can listen to that first segment again if you missed it. And in this segment, we're going to be talking about onboarding new firefighters. And yes, we've all seen on social media and heard this about these new firefighters and that about those firefighters. You know what? The job of fighting fire is always going to be there. I don't think that's ever going to disappear. And there will always be people who have in their heart to serve their community or the neighboring community by being a firefighter and doing what's risky. And we know, and we'd be remiss if we didn't bring this up today, but we know that we are now mourning another brother who was lost last Friday, firefighter James Muller from Irmo Fire District in South Carolina, who was buried on Wednesday. To his family, to his department, to his friends, and everybody who knew him, and the praise is all over social media. We send our best wishes, our condolences, and that we ask that his memory always be for a blessing. And if you want to learn from a guy who only had 7 years, and for as strong as he was as a firefighter, 7 years, I've heard people who were at conferences with him and had nothing but the very best words to say for him. So please keep him and his family in your hearts as we move ahead. So, Chief, with all these complaints about, oh, these young guys don't know anything and these guys think they know everything, how do we find that mid-ground to bring in the type of candidates that we need today and want in our fire departments?
I think, first of all, we've got to acknowledge that I'm in a different uniform today.
Yes, you are.
Last Friday. So I'm actually out at the Alan V. Brunacini Command Training Center. We're doing some classes, and today we're recording a few more podcasts. So I'm thank you for accommodating me and being patient because, I don't go to a lot of fires, to be honest with you, but that one came in Friday, and we were a little short-staffed, and I thought it would be the right thing to do, which ended up being the right thing to do.
As soon as I saw your face, because I didn't hear it because you had it down, but you heard it. As soon as I saw your face, I said, you have to go.
Yeah.
I just knew it.
I listened. It's like, oh yeah, that's a fire. So anyway, talking about onboarding and getting back to the culture piece, I think onboarding starts the very first encounter that you have with a prospective firefighter. And what we do is we have orientation meetings before they're even officially hired by the city. And in those orientation meetings, we go over what the expectations are of our department. And we talk about the culture of our fire department, our focus, which is customer service. And we also talk about what we really do. I think so often we make these brochures when we're recruiting firefighters that have, action scenes where firefighters are on ladders and advancing hose lines and fire blowing out of windows. Well, that's 2% of what we actually do. Right. And you bring them into a service where, we kind of made a promise to them like, hey, look at all this action that we're going to do. And then we send them on 15 lift assists a day. And they're like, wait a minute, I was promoted into this job that looked like we were going to be putting on turnout gear and flowing a lot of water. And now I'm going to help people, get back into bed at 2:00 in the morning. So I think we have to be realistic with the firefighters that are onboarding what the job is and what is expected out of them when they do get on board. And then you talk about that culture. And I've had people sometimes get up and say, you know what, this isn't for me. This isn't what I thought it was. And then I've had other people come to me and say, you're describing exactly who I am and what I want to do. So I've had two sides of the coin. And, at the end of those meetings, when I conduct them, and myself and some of our battalion chiefs do that meeting with the prospective firefighters, we say, hey, no harm, no foul. If at the end of this meeting you decide that this isn't really for you, let's shake hands and be friends, and there's no shame in that. So we actually get people who self-select, and say this isn't the job for me, or this isn't the fire department for me, because we do have a heavy focus on customer service and Mrs. Smith and taking care of people at 2:00 in the morning that fall out of bed. The same way we would, take care of that fire that comes in at 2:00 in the morning. We have to do them both with passion and compassion and with a smile on our face, whether it's the first call or the 15th call of the day. So it starts with that orientation session. The other thing that we talk about at Minnetonka is we are a training fire department, and we tell them right away, if you don't like to train, this is not the department for you, because we do train. We train every day. There's a training going on at our department. So whether it's, a little drill pumping a truck, EMS drills, we have a new piece of equipment, whatever it is, we're training every single day. So the expectation is when you're a firefighter and you're on duty, you're going to do some training every single day. And the other thing that we talk about is being battle ready. And I mentioned that in the first segment, and we go into detail on that. And being battle ready means that the truck is ready to go. We have fuel, we have water, there's air in the tanks, but then we also talk about it, how that relates to you personally. We mean that you're fit for duty, that you got a good night's sleep, your head's in the right space to be doing the job that day. You're physically fit, you're capable, you're focused. So all those things about being ready when the bell goes off, you're going to be prepared to take care of whatever call you're going on. So after that onboarding session, where we do that first orientation, we bring them back for 2 more orientations. Then once they become employees, one of the orientations, we take care of a lot of the housekeeping paperwork, but then we also talk about the Minnetonka Way. We have a 25-page document, and if any of your viewers and listeners would like a copy of that, I'll be more than happy to send it out. You can email me, and I'll send that out to whoever would like to see it. And it's really a compilation of the work that we've done as a department over the last 10 years. We just put that together this last year. And in the Minnetonka Way, we talk about our culture. We talk about the expectations. We talk about our shared values and our mission. And we go over that in detail, not only to talk about how that relates to that individual, but how that individual relates back to the culture. And by the end of that session, we're asking them to put together their goals and their wishes for their career, because we want them thinking ahead about that. So the Minnetonka Way has been really good, because it is the work that all of our firefighters and officers have done over the last 10 years to define our culture.
Let's take a step back, and other than just posting it on social media and other places, how, in this day and age, how are you attracting people who are interested in joining before you even get to that first orientation?
I think our firefighters are the best tool when it comes to recruiting. And we do a lot. We have a great communications department at the city. They put together some really nice pieces, whether it's printed ads. We have some like business cards that we give all of our firefighters. So if the firefighters are at the gym, they're at the farmer's market, they're at their softball games, or whatever they're doing, they can hand these cards out that we're looking for firefighters, and it has the website address, and it talks just about the attributes that we're looking for in a firefighter. And a lot of times, I think by that word of mouth and the firefighters actually doing the recruiting, we find some very strong candidates that way, because those people have an opportunity to talk to them. We have a very diverse department too, and I think when you have a diverse department that looks like the community, you're going to be more apt to get people from the community. And I think right now we're about 15 or 16% female, which is higher than the national average of 4%. And I think, again, when female firefighters come through, or prospective firefighters come through, and they see there's women working here. It's like, well, women are working here. I can do this. We had a little girl in the fire station a few weeks ago, and she was probably like 6 or 7 years old. And she was surprised there were female firefighters. So even in this day and age, little kids are still conditioned to think that it's only a man's job. So when she came in and saw that there were 2 female firefighters on duty, this girl lit up, and you could see her mind like, go, wait a minute, I can do this job too. Like these women are doing when I'm old enough. And it was really neat to see that transformation where what she thought the job was changed. So hopefully she'll come back in about 11 or 12 years and put an application in and become a firefighter. But my point is, when you see people that look like you, that are from your community, that come from all walks of life, you're more apt to put that application in and go ahead and pursue it. Another thing that we do, once we kind of find those people, if we're not in an active recruitment period, we still keep in contact with them. So if you go to our website, there's like an interest card that you can fill out. Just put your name, email address, and phone number. And we have a battalion chief that one of his duties is recruitment. And Zach will call you and say, hey, why don't you come on in and go on a ride along with us? So we have that prospective person come in, go on a ride along so they get an idea of what we do. And a lot of times what happens, I mean, because we're a pretty busy department, is we end up running a few calls and that hooks them. Because they you get in a fire truck with red lights and sirens on and the adrenaline starts going and you see the teamwork and camaraderie and everything else of the fire service. Really piques the interest of people. So even if we are not doing an active hiring and say, it's 6 or 8 months later that the active hiring comes in, we keep in touch with those people by doing those ride-alongs, inviting them back to the station and keeping in touch with them as far as what is going on. The other way that we advertise too is just getting out with the high schools and letting high school kids know, hey, this is an option for you. This is a job. Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs,
Sure.
He talks about how the people aren't entering the trades, and we've kind of we've de-glamorized anybody who works with their hands these days. And what we want to do is again, say this is an option for you, not only as a part-time firefighter, but also as a career. And we talk about what that career looks like. In my area, we've never paid more money, and the benefits have never been better to be a firefighter. And when we look at what we were getting for applications 10 years ago versus today, and I think the American Fire Service is really feeling this in most places, the applications are down. There's a lack of interest in getting into public safety, and there's various reasons for that. But what we try to do is talk about the benefits and talk about the pay and talk about the retirement and what it means to work at our city. So when people see that and start to understand that these jobs, at least thankfully in our area, doesn't mean you have to work 2 jobs anymore. When I entered the fire service and I was a full-time firefighter, you had to have 2 jobs. I mean, we didn't pay very well, but today the pay is very competitive with a lot of other industries, and the opportunities are there for upward mobility. So we talk about all of that too, and hopefully that gets some interest from people, and they really take it seriously as a career.
I hope so, because I was in that situation where, and I think we talked about this last week before we went on the air, but when I walked into that firehouse in outside of Greensboro, North Carolina, I had gone in just to see the apparatus, like I used to do all around suburban Boston. I could use hand tools because my dad had them in the garage, and he showed me how to use a hammer and a hand drill and screwdrivers and Phillips head flatheads and basic household repairs and stuff like that. He just showed me how. He wasn't a plumber, he wasn't an electrician, but he showed me basic things. So when I got there, I had no background in the fire. So I didn't even take care of my own car other than putting gas in it. And then I'd leave the tab for my dad to pay, because that's what he said to do. He goes, go down to George's, fill up. And that was what, you and I might remember back in the days when gas was about 27 cents a gallon. And now one of the pains, as much as I enjoy watching reruns of Emergency, is when they go down some of those streets in LA and you see gasoline 39.9 cents.
Yes.
But be that as it may, talking about culture, I was the first college graduate to ever apply to that department. This was 77. And they we wound up with a wonderful culture. You know, my buddy and I were strangers. We're the first two Jewish people ever even walked into the doors of this department, welcomed with open arms, care, great training, great understanding. Have you done this? No, we'll show you how to do it. And step by step, there was no, how come you don't know this? If you're in the, what? I'm just a guy in a three-piece suit who walked in there one day and traded a lot of it for 2 pieces of bunker gear and a helmet. And never, ever have I rued that day. I think it was one of the best days of my life. It wasn't intended. It just happened. But it gave me a whole new purpose in life. And I've tried to maintain what I can. Once I couldn't do active service, I tried to keep my connection going and growing with the fire service. In every community that we lived in, I would visit firehouses. I would talk to firefighters, ask them. I kept reading the trades, kept subscribing to them, because it just became how I define myself. And even today, I define myself as a man of faith, of family, and the fire service. And even my teaching comes after the fire service, because I learned so much from teachers who wanted to give to me and my buddy the education that we needed and we wanted. We were hungry for it, and we weren't getting a penny for it. We didn't get a penny for it. We did it as volunteers, and we loved every call that we were able to go on, especially together, that we'd make the same apparatus together. And we worked we just learned within 3 months to work as a team. And we knew who was going to sit where on the apparatus. They weren't assigned, but we always knew what each of us liked, or what the duty captain liked from us. And we just learned. We didn't try to say, well, wouldn't it be better? Nah, we just kept our mouths shut and said, thank you. We'll do it. We'll try to do it better each time. And we grew and I was sent to the State Fire College 3 years in a row. For one was basic firemanship, which I'd already done in-house. Then we did pump operations and engineer qualification. And then I did high-level rescue for a kid who had been acrophobic since he was 5 years old. And I never believed you'd ever get me to crawl off a parapet of a 6-story building, both as a rescuer or a victim in a Stokes. But I did. And I got my certificate as a high-level rescue. And we had to leave, unfortunately, to relocate before that 4th year. But then I found out from the chief years later, back in 2017. He said, do you and Richard ever think why I sent you to the fire service, to the fire college? We said, actually, Chief, we had no idea. We thought you were nuts, because we were the brand new kids in there, and you told us to go to the fire college. He says, because right away I saw that you guys were going to be leaders. You guys were going to be the new captains in the volunteer side.
Wow.
And I said, what? He said, you didn't know that? I said, no, sir. We every time we're together, we always ask, why the hell did he pick us to go to those damn fire college? That was because he saw in us that we didn't see in ourselves. He saw us to be new officers for that department. Unfortunately, we both wound up having to leave. He joined Metro PD in Washington, D.C., where he grew up, and we relocated to the Syracuse area, but I got into another department there. But I was so lucky, and I think that what I'm hearing from you is that, again, not that Minnetonka's paid or career, but it's your dedication to your firefighters. And that's, I think, what makes what you've described to us just now. I think that makes such a big difference, because you could take another dozen fire departments that people know by name, but don't have that same attitude that Minnetonka has, that you've brought to them and built around them through that. And I think if people don't look more seriously at the job, it's not just a job, because you could be a bank teller and have a job and probably get more money maybe than a firefighter. But it is the passion that brings us to this job. It is the desire to help our community, or the community we serve, even if we don't live in it specifically, but the community or communities we serve. I think there's something self-fulfilling when you do your first CPR and you bring that patient, you see them take that respiration on their own. You take it's not a thumper anymore. We have different names from now, but in my day, they were the thumper. You take them off because they don't need it anymore. I remember The first one I did CPR on, unfortunately, did not survive. The second one I did. We did survive. And I had tears running down my eyes when I was able to pull back and sit on my knees. And we were now doing basic life support on him and not advanced life support. Because me and my partner, I said, we just saved this guy's life.
Mhm.
He was dead a minute ago, and we brought him back. And they were just smiling, but tears in our eyes to think that this is what this job gave us. The ability, once in a while, to bring somebody back from the brink and send them back to their families and their friends. And there's no greater feeling. Other than having your own kids or your own grandkids, there is no better feeling than when you help somebody like that.
But I think you hit on a couple of really good points there and to dig into a little deeper. And I've read it several times, just going back to you talking about you and your buddy that went to the fire college together and joined the department at the same time. People are more successful in any kind of job when they have a friend at work or friends at work.
Yeah.
And when you have an environment that's collegial, that is welcoming, that is free of hazing and some of these other foolish things that happen in some departments, you're going to have people that stay there, and especially when they make that connection. And, you know, to further and lesser degrees, I see that within my department. There's a couple of the stations that have a ton of camaraderie, and they do everything together. Unfortunately, on December 4th, we had a very serious injury of one of our firefighters fell during a training exercise on the ice and had a traumatic brain injury. He was in a coma for a month. And he fortunately came out, was still in ICU for a long time after that, had to have surgeries and everything else. He's still in rehab to this day. He's out on the West Coast in rehab. We had 6 guys from our department, the minute that he could get visitors, that on their own bought plane tickets and went out and saw him, because of that connection that they have with each other. And these are people who from all walks of life. They're paid on call firefighters and career battalion chiefs that are really tight. And, you know, one guy is an airplane mechanic. Another guy is a video editor. I mean, but these guys come together from these diverse backgrounds and collectively have this camaraderie and this bond. And we always say that if you don't have friends in the fire service, when you join the fire department, you're going to have friends in the fire service very soon. And pretty soon, you know, in your personal life, a lot of the other friendships, fortunately or unfortunately, kind of start to change, because that camaraderie that you have and the things that you face with your fellow firefighters, the civilian just doesn't get it, doesn't know about it, and it's hard to explain. We don't even talk to them about it. But when we're together, we can talk about it. So I think having that friend at work and that camaraderie is very, very important. The other thing, when we get back to getting new firefighters in, and you were talking about being college educated, I think everyone is college educated, just about. You know, it's rare that we have firefighters in my community that don't have a college degree. But to your point about, you know, knowing how to operate a saw or a drill, you know, a lot of these folks have never touched a saw. They've never touched power equipment. And we need to be patient about that. We just need to adapt our training program to say, you know, these folks are coming in without what we would call blue collar skills. And we're going to adapt our training so we can show them safely how to use these tools, how to be comfortable with them, give them enough sets and reps with it. So when they have to use extrication equipment or sawzalls or anything else on an emergency scene, they're very proficient on those tools. So we have to have that. And then the other thing about the new firefighters is telling them why. And Simon Sinek writes a book, Start With Why. I think it's we talk about start with why in the Minnetonka way. We talk about start with why when we're teaching Blue Card. We let people know why they're doing the things that they're doing. So things like Blue Card, it's all based on the Brett Tarver tragedy that happened back in 2001. There was a tremendous 6-year recovery process that the Phoenix Fire Department went through with Chief Bernasini at the helm that guided the change and the transformation of that fire department, and subsequently the American Fire Service to what it is today. There were a lot of things that we didn't have when Brett Tarver died that we have today, like heads-up display in your SCBA, the standard that everybody has a radio or communication device, et cetera, et cetera. So we go back and say, the reason why we do things the way we do is there's a why behind it, because today's generation wants to know why we're doing it a certain way. And God bless the guys who brought us up through the fire service, but a lot of times you weren't allowed to ask why. You just do it, right? So another thing we have to adapt to is having that explanation and being able to tell people exactly why they're doing the things that they're doing. And then it connects in their minds, and they're going to be a better firefighter for it.
Right. That's a good point. The guy who was our mentor, our main mentor back in that department, and that kid, my buddy, was only 18 years old when we met that night, and I was 25. And it's amazing to think that 40 plus years later, he's still my best friend. And I think and that's because of our friend who became our mentor, and he was one of the daytime guys there, and he was always explaining why to us from the moment he first took out an SCBA suitcase in those days, because we still used the suitcases, and he would explain every step why we do it this way, the benefits, and why we don't want to do it this way, because this is what could happen. And for me, it was like, he wasn't an instructor officially, but I had been already a teacher for 12 years, and I'm thinking, this guy's a great teacher. He's explaining everything to us. And I think that's part of the reason why that Rich and I were able to jump on so quickly. And that was October of 77. And I think it was December, I was put on the nozzle my first working house fire. And I was, I was a little leery. But I did it, and the captain was right there with me, and we got it done. And I walked back saying, holy smokes, I was a real fireman. I was a real fireman that time. I really did the same stuff that I always been watching others do. And boy, you talk about a feeling of self-satisfaction. I did it. I actually put that water on the fire and knocked it down and saved the house, because this was basically a kitchen storeroom area. And the people didn't have to leave the home, thank goodness. We did great overhaul. Tarps come out. The chief was very, very strict about making sure the tarps come out to protect anything we could protect. And he didn't have a lot of patience if we messed things up in a house. He didn't like that. But that taught us too. That taught us that we have to aim to do the very best job we can. Doesn't mean we're perfect, because that's why we still have erases at the end of pencils, because we still make mistakes, because we're human. But it doesn't mean we can't aspire to do the very best that we can. And this is a job, actually, every job in public safety are the jobs that require us to be able to do the job to the best of our ability, and understand there are times where you can really take a lot of self-satisfaction away because you did something really good, no matter what it was. It could be as simple as helping a little kid walked away from the front yard back to the house, or finding a lost child who disappeared near a river, but you find them alive and well. That's,
we like to say we're in the bad day business, right?
Right.
And like you're talking about, we're here to make somebody's bad day better. And I think, again, with recruitment and retention, when you can have those rewarding experiences that you're talking about, that hooks people, right? That keeps them engaged, interested, dedicated. If you don't give your firefighters the opportunity to have those experiences, that's when people fall away.
So with that being said, let's bring up something that I've talked with Chief Rubin about, and several other chiefs about. Every once in a while, when we're trying to run a program with that kind of success and that interest, every once in a while, there's a bad apple that shows up in the barrel, and the Debbie Downer, and this isn't good, and I don't like this, and this isn't good. Well, why are you still here? Well, I don't know, I'm just doing it. So how do we prevent that venom? Because my daughter, who works at the museum, said you can't always use poisonous, Dad. There's venom and there's poison, two different things. So how do we stop the flow of that kind of venom infiltrating the people who are really happy there, but hearing this guy or gal moaning and groaning every shift.
And that's kind of a scourge of the fire service, right? That one or two people that can bring everyone else down. And what we have to do is not normalize it. That's not our culture. That's not the way we do business. We're here because we like it. And let's face it, all of our departments have one. I had a guy come in from out of town that rode along with our department, and the firehouse expert was riding along that day, and he ended up, I asked the ride along guy, I go, how'd it go? He goes, pretty good. I go, well, how was your experience? He goes, really good. He goes, except there was one guy. And it's like, I knew exactly who he was talking about because we all have them, right?
Right.
But what I do, or what we try to do as an organization, is not normalize that behavior and let people know, that that's an exception and not the rule. And then when we do have those people who are negative and have a complaint about everything, is you talk to them about it and say, look, I hear that you're X, Y, and Z, let's talk about it and work this out. I have an open door, open mind policy as a fire chief. And if anybody has a complaint about either how we're operating and their officers can't resolve it, go ahead and bring it to me. I'm more than willing to listen. We have those open doors in our organization. But a lot of times what you'll find is those individuals really aren't upset with the organization. They're not really upset with the fire service as a whole. They're just miserable people. If you went to their homes, they're not living a happy life at home either. So
Right.
What we try to do then is get that person help if we can, whether it's through our employee assistance program. We have a wonderful behavioral health system in the state of Minnesota specifically for firefighters. It's called MinFire. It is funded by the state. The state puts $4 or $5 million a year into it, and it's for cardiac cancer and mental health. And there's counselors there, professional counselors that can help people out. So we try to get folks the help, because a lot of times their attitude might be just a symptom of something else going on that they might need help with.
Right.
If they're beyond help or they won't take the help, then we have to talk about their performance, and maybe they're not a good fit for the organization anymore. And I'm not saying, we go and slash everyone within the organization that's negative or has a critique of something. But if somebody really has some behavioral problems and they are really upset all the time, we have to sit and talk to those
Right.
people and figure out what's going on and listen, and we might learn something too along the way. But we just can't normalize the behavior. I guess that's my bottom line. Because, Bruno used to say, people don't get fed up and leave, they get fed up and stay. And then they start infecting that organization with those negative thoughts. So, trying to find out what's going on with them and why they've been fed up and hopefully try to turn that around.
Right. Well, that's a good way of looking at it. And I hope that other people who are listening or watching this episode will take that to heart and understand that, listen, no matter what job you're in, there are going to be crappy days, and that's just life. My dad worked for the same company 42 years, and it was only in probably the last 10 years that he got this supervisor. And my dad very rarely had a bad word for anybody, as we were kids, 3 boys growing up. And when he would come back from work angry, we knew, was it this guy? Was it Mr. F? Yep. I said, okay, Pop, we understand. and that was it. And then, we just try to deflect his being upset to good family stuff and things like that, just so that he didn't get down, because he was good at his job. He liked doing it. And it was just this one guy who was the section head in the office, in the buying section, that kept giving him grief. And he never knew why. My dad would bring home and design posters by hand, because we didn't have Mimeos and stuff, regular copy machines back then. And he would spend 3 hours. He would get up at 3:30, 3:45 in the morning. He was in his office by 5 a.m. at the latest, come home at 6 o'clock at night, have dinner, do the dishes, and then he'd sit down and start doing his office home. He called it his office homework. and design these posters. He had beautiful penmanship, and he would design them, and that's what they put in the newspapers, was what he hand designed. And I said to him, I said, when I was old enough to understand, I said, Pop, don't let this guy get to you. You like what you're doing. You have a lot of friends there. We've had a lot of them here at the house, and we've gone to the Red Sox games with them and stuff like that. Don't let this guy mess it up for you. He's just a wipe. That's all he is. You're the good guy. You like, what's his name there? You like, what's his name? They were at the party a couple of weeks ago. He was there with his wife. They were really nice people. He showed me a magic trick, stuff like that. These are the kind of people you want to remember from your office, Dad, not the guy who's always bugging you. So I think what you say is very true. And the people who are as dedicated to the job as you have in Minnetonka and many, many other fire departments around this wonderful country of ours, who that's the way they think. Yeah, there's going to be bad crap that happens on this job. Anything in public safety, we're going to have that. That's all there is to it. But it's how we deal with it. And, for a long time, we didn't even deal with it at all. We just pulled the black shade down and say, it's gone. We don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yep.
But thankfully, we have raised that black shade, and we now know that we have health issues that we have to deal with in the fire service. We have behavioral health issues we have to deal with in the fire service. And you know what? It doesn't mean we're weak. It doesn't mean we're bad. It just means we're human. And we're in tough jobs. No one's ever going to say that this job is simple and unemotional. Because from the moment the tones go off and your adrenaline pumps up, right there as you're trying to get on your gear and get on the apparatus, you go there, you get your detail, what you're supposed to do, come back, you clean up. Then when they're all done, that's where it hits you. And you can say, wow, that was a tough fight, but you know what? We got the best of it at the end. We really did. We changed tactic a little bit. We got the best of it. Yeah, we had a little problem at the beginning, but you know what? We didn't have all the facts at that moment. We just couldn't see it all. We didn't have the information there, but it wasn't our fault. We just had to deal with what we had, and then we were able to improve on that. And if we can get that philosophy out to the masses and understand that there are going to be bad days, there are going to be difficult calls, and we can't be afraid to step up and say, Cap, I got a problem with that call we had. I can't get it out of my head. It was tough. And, I'm sure that captain will make every effort, either on his or her own part, or they'll get somebody else in the department to sit down with that firefighter and say, let's talk it out. Tell me what's hitting you. Listen, we all, with all the years, even though my 8 and your many more, but we all have calls that were very difficult for us. And they're always in that little file cabinet in the brain. And we try to keep them closed most of the time, but once in a while they come out and we remember them. And it's tough. I've been out since 85, and I still have at least 6 calls that I will never forget because of what happened on those calls. Did I and the people with me do a great job? Hell yeah, we did. That didn't mean that the call was easy because of what happened and loss of life and stuff like that. You don't want to, that loss of life, the first time you see that is also very difficult for this job. Right. And sometimes that's where I can tell you, boy, if we had behavioral health counseling back in my day, would have made a big difference to a bunch of people that I knew back in those 8 years.
And it's been wonderful to see the transformation, because the fire service that I joined, we didn't talk about it. We didn't have debriefings and defusings, and we swallowed a lot of that and sometimes drank it away. Yeah. But the fire service has greatly evolved now. And I think that when you are able to talk about it, and either you have a formal defusing, or, you just get back and get around the kitchen table and talk about things, the things that frustrate our officers sometimes aren't the things that you would necessarily think is a traumatic event. So, they can get frustrated by a difficult extrication, even where the patient wasn't in serious condition, but that was very challenging for them and really taxed them. So I think coming back and talking about it it's a wonderful thing. And I had to chuckle just to back up to when you were talking about your dad. My son just turned 23, and for most of his life, only the first 6 months of his life, I wasn't a fire chief, but for 22 years and 6 months, I've been a fire chief. So my kid could always tell who I was talking about on the phone because he would hear one side of the conversation, and I'd hang up and he'd go, "Oh, so-and-so again, huh?" And I was like, "Yep." And he could point them out. And it's going back. So I think the behavioral thing is very important. I don't want to gloss over that. But the other thing that, another Brunaciniism is, if you have a ugly person, follow them home and you'll find ugly parents. And by that, he means the way people were raised. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people, everyone's raised different. Everybody's raised with different values. Everybody has different things that are important in their homes. And sometimes you find people who were raised by wolves, or they were raised by parents who weren't supportive or caring, or they were abusive. And oftentimes, those are the problems that we inherit in the fire service. So going back to your negative Nelly question, we have to dig deeper a lot of times because it's things that we can't fix. We can't fix a 40-year-old person who was in a very unhealthy environment when they were growing up, because that's already in their DNA. We can help them. Right. We can offer help, but some of those things, they're so deeply embedded. So that's why on the front end of things, just going back to the recruitment and retention, we have a psychological screening that we do for all new employees. You get a conditional offer, and part of that conditional offer is getting a positive review from our psychologist. And if you don't get the positive review, we say thanks, but no thanks, because there are some people out there that, because of their predisposition mentally, just aren't a good fit for the fire service. Mm-hmm. And I find oftentimes the people who were not a good fit for the fire service, or who were brought in before those kind of screenings happen, are the ones that have a lot of issues with PTSD, with drug or alcohol abuse or addiction, with poor relationships, on and on. So I think that screening on the front end of things, and again, it's not to be exclusive. It's not to keep people out. But we need to make sure as a service that we're bringing people in that can survive and thrive as a firefighter.
Right. And I think that's the most important thing, because, we all take an oath when we join. And again, doesn't make any difference what department you're with, career, volunteer, part pay, WUI. It's the fact is we take an oath to follow through. And it's not always an easy oath to fulfill. But I would say 99% of us try with every call,
right,
to fulfill that oath. And we also have to realize that just because somebody might have a problem that they don't agree with you, or they seem to be a little more brash in the firehouse, or even on the emergency ground, that might not be their real personality. There might be something there that's affecting them, that they're trying to keep quiet and personal. But if it starts to affect the job and the morale of the shift, then we can address it, but address it in the right way, rather
right.
than if we went back 25 years ago, the address would be, there's the door.
Yeah.
But we don't always have to do that today.
Right.
I don't think it's just because we're trying to retain everybody we can. I think we want to retain the best that will do the best for our community. And there's nothing wrong with having that goal.
And I love it when I'm talking to officers and they'll just share with me, an issue that they dealt with. And if they suspect that there's a mental health issue, they're the ones who are bringing, it doesn't have to come to the chief's office. It's the captains and lieutenants that are bringing up, maybe you should call EAP. Maybe you should call Minfire. Maybe, there's these resources available for you to get some help and talk to somebody. I was talking to a fellow fire chief this week that was out here, and he's going through some hard times. And I asked him, I said, are you are you talking to somebody? He goes, well, I'm talking to my friends and stuff. I go, I mean, you really need to probably talk to a professional at this point. And I care about you. And that's why I'm asking that. And he's like, yeah, I will. He first started like, I probably shouldn't. He goes, I will. So, those prompting from your friends, from your officers, from your chiefs can just get people a nudge in the right direction. So then they do pick up the phone and get the help that they need.
Right. Well, this has been both chapters of our interview have been wonderful and enlightening and educational, as they always are when you have the time to join me. And I really treasure the time that we're together, because there's so much to learn from you. And it's no secret that I listen to every B Shifter podcast. I just learned so much more from everybody. At some point, I hope I have the opportunity to, we just had the sad anniversary of the Houston loss. And I wish I would one day just have one-on-one, not on the air or anything like that, with Chief Garrison, because I can imagine the hell that he went through and the emotional upheaval.
I get to see Chief Garrison today. And I haven't seen him yet because he just came back from Houston because it was the 5-year anniversary.
Right.
He and some of the members of the team then got together and memorialized those firefighters that were lost for that day, and then Captain Bill Dowling a couple of years later. But as a result of that incident, so I get to learn from these guys, and like I said at the top of the first segment, I am so fortunate that these are the people that I sometimes look around the room and it's like, how did I get here? Because these are the guys who I grew up idolizing as chiefs, authors, and everything else. So I'm just fortunate. And Steve, thank you for bringing the good word out to people and for spreading the positivity that we have within the fire service and the innovations that we have in the fire service. So thank you for what you do.
Well, it's a pleasure, and it's a work of the heart, as they say, because this is what I care about. And I really see that if we work together and we remember that, especially in the fire service, there's very little we can do by ourselves. But when we're a team, whether it's 2 of us, 3 of us, 4 of us, we can do a hell of a lot on any call. And that's what we have to remember. We are a team. And one thing that, I wrote an article several months ago that was in the Firehouse Tribune, and talking about the word family that we bandy about quite a bit. Oh, brother this and sister this, and we're Firehouse family. And I said, but do you really treat people like their family? Or just 2 of you kind of like look over at Pete over there in the corner and think, hey, that son of a... Yeah. I said, that's not family. That's not family. And if you're going to use the term, live the term. Because if we live it like we're family, and again, it was television back in the 70s, but when you see how the team at Station 51, how Bob Senator created that and worked to form that, and lucky enough to have the LA County Fire Department saying, yeah, we're on board. We're going to give you files. You can look at some of the stories that the real calls we've been on, and we'll help you with those and stuff like that. You see that, yeah, they can, the Joker with Chet and with the water bomb stuff. The fact is, when push came to shove, they were a team and they worked together. And that may have been television in the 70s, but that's who we can be in the 21st century. In reality, we don't have to be a fictional TV series. And that's what we have to live by.
Yep, absolutely.
So our sincere thanks to Chief John Vance of B Shifter. And folks, let me tell you something. If you don't know what the blue card system is or what B Shifter is about, let me recommend, start off listening to the podcasts. Okay? Listen to the podcasts. Then you can go to the website, the B Shifter website. And we're going to put that website and Chief Vance's email in the show notes. But if you take it step by step, you can learn so much about what we do. And the safest ways that we can do it. And it goes everything from dressing, response, on scene, coming back, accountability, Mayday, everything that we have talked about on these with some of the best instructors and teachers in our field, you can learn through B-Shifter. Now, no, I don't work for them. Chief Vance, we've never met in person, but I consider him a friend. Nick Bernasini, I listen to Nick's podcast. I love it. He makes me laugh. He makes me cry. But his dad, his father, was the man who guided us to the fire service that we have today. So I love listening to him. Chief Garrison, and this new young man I heard today, Jeffrey King. The people on the B-Shifter podcast come, and Josh Blum, can't forget Josh either. But these people know their business. They know what it takes to be firefighters. They know what it takes to be as safe as we can be. Because, yes, there are variables on every fire ground or emergency scene. But it's a way for you to learn to do your job to the best of your ability and be as safe as possible. Not just you, but everybody on that emergency scene. So I highly would recommend visiting the B-Shifter website, checking in with Chief Vance himself. As I said, we'll put the email in the show notes. But learn about it. If you have a desire and your department has a desire to become a better department in all manners, not just tactics. You know, I heard somebody say on social media, B-Shifter, all they talk about is tactics. I said, oh, that must be a new B-Shifter, because I've been listening to B-Shifter for a couple of years now, and I don't hear a lot about tactics per se. I hear about radio traffic. Oh, does your department have a problem with radio traffic? Okay, radio traffic. The stuff I love is the stuff about the IC. Belongs in one place, in the buggy, windows closed, following everything that's going on, and not prancing around all across the fire ground. There's so much to learn with B-Shifter. Visit the website. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and everything we do, and the reason for that, it's all in case that Mayday comes through. We're setting everything up to not only prevent the Mayday, but if it does happen, we're going to be able to address it because we have a commander in a strategic position. But yeah, come to B-Shifter, check it out, and feel free to drop me a note if you have any questions about Blue Card.
Great. Well, again, thanks to Chief John Vance for joining us. A second day out of a very, very busy schedule. As he mentioned, they're recording podcasts today, more B-Shifter podcasts, but he made the time so we could come back and finish this. We'll get the video hopefully posted later today, and then the audio will be released over the weekend. Chief, thank you again so much for taking time out of busy schedule, flying back and forth from Minnesota back down to Phoenix again. I know it's a tough job having to go to Phoenix from Minnesota.
Someone's got to do it, though, and I'll gladly volunteer for that one.
Okay,
yes.
Very good. Well, I'm gonna, now that I actually made my first reservation to travel for the first time since 2020 when I took sick, I'm hoping that I'm gonna be able to maybe set up a time to come out and visit Phoenix. And I'd love to. I was there once for my professional business in the Phoenix area, and it was wonderful. But I didn't get a chance to visit any of the stations. But I'd love to come back and especially go out there and see this, come up and visit the center.
Love to have you. Thank you so much, Steve.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir. Folks, if you're watching the video, that will be the end of the video version of the podcast. If you're listening to the audio, you know what's going to happen. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with a little bit more after that. But again, once again, our thanks to Chief John Vance for joining us on 2 different days out of his busy schedule as we talked about firefighter culture, how to build it, how to keep it going, how to onboard new firefighters for your department. All this is, you just listen to the audio, watch the video, or check in with B-Shifter and Chief Vance. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be right back if you're listening to the audio right after these words. As always, please stay tuned.